Imagine staring into your living room, right? And instead of seeing this beautiful, thriving aquatic ecosystem that you've put so much work into, you just see a glass box.
Right.
But it's not just empty. It's filled with this, like, impenetrable, glowing green fog.
Oh, that is the worst. Just absolute biological soup.
Yeah, exactly. The whole vibrant community you meticulously curated is just completely hidden behind it. So, welcome to today's deep dive. I am really thrilled you're joining us because today we are looking at the drastic and honestly sometimes terrifying act of hitting the ultimate reset button on a complex, failing system.
Which is something I think, we can all relate to in some way.
For sure. And our roadmap for this today is this really fascinating micro case study. It's a journal entry titled Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 283.
Quite the series.
I know, right? The subtitle is A Fresh Start of Redesigning the Dwarf Cichlid Tank. And this was penned by a very dedicated hobbyist named Ang, published on July 6th, 2026.
It's honestly a remarkable document to unpack. I mean, on the surface, sure, you are just reading a hobbyist log about, updating a fish tank.
Yeah.
But if you read a little closer, it completely transforms. It becomes this masterclass on recognizing system failure, diagnosing architectural flaws, and executing a purposeful redesign that actually balances the needs of entirely different stakeholders.
Stakeholders being the fish and the human.
Exactly.
Exactly. Well, that is our mission for you today. We are going to explore exactly why this hobbyist was forced to scrap an entire living ecosystem. And then we will decode the highly deliberate structural choices that are required to build a perfect sanctuary for a very specific resident, which is the dwarf cichlid.
Right, a very particular little fish.
Very particular. But we have to start at the breaking point. Before we analyze all the brilliance of the new design, we need to understand the environmental collapse that forced Ang's hand.
The green water.
Yes. The journal describes this totally unresolvable algae bloom, resulting in what they just call green water.
Yeah, a total opaque takeover. Right. The entry notes that, natural resolutions just completely failed to balance the ecosystem, which, is a super common hazard when you're dealing with closed biological loops.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to push back on the timeline here a bit.
Sure.
Ang actually mentions applying specialized treatments, right? Like stuff from a bottle that explicitly claimed to fix the algae issue.
Yeah.
And they were completely ineffective.
Completely.
I think a lot of people listening, and, myself included, might wonder if tearing down the entire system is just a massive overreaction.
You mean the nuclear option?
Yeah. It's like having a dense, unliftable fog roll into a theater and completely ruin the show.
It's
annoying. But an algae bloom is essentially just an imbalance of light and nutrients, right? We go nuclear. Right. Couldn't the designer just, upgrade the water filter? Or turn off the lights for a few days, or just pour in a stronger chemical treatment? Throwing out the whole ecosystem over some green water just seems wild to me.
Well, I totally understand that skepticism. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to look at the mechanics of why those chemical treatments actually fail in a closed environment like an aquarium.
Okay, walk me through that.
Let's trace the biology. When you pour an algaecide into a tank, it does exactly what it says on the bottle. It kills the algae.
Right. Problem solved, I would think.
You'd think so, but no. That dead organic matter doesn't just disappear into thin air. It sinks to the bottom of the tank and it begins to rot.
Oh, goo. Oh.
Yeah. And as it decays, all the beneficial bacteria in the tank start breaking it down. And that process releases a massive spike of ammonia and nitrates right back into the water.
Wait, and what do surviving algae spores absolutely love to feed on?
I think you know.
Nitrates.
Precisely. So your quick fix actually becomes this massive fertilizer drop for the next generation of algae.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the tank clears up for a day or two, and then a secondary bloom erupts, and it's often way worse than the first one.
That is so frustrating.
It is. Because in a natural river or, a lake, fresh water is constantly flushing all that decaying matter away. But in a 20-gallon glass box in your living room,
there's nowhere for it to go.
Exactly. The system is entirely closed. There is no river. The cycle just reinforces itself, and it traps the whole environment in this perpetual state of chemical whiplash.
Okay, well, that chemical loop definitely makes hitting the reset button a lot more understandable.
Right.
But reading the journal, it seemed like the ultimate catalyst for starting from scratch wasn't necessarily just the biological presence of the algae itself.
No, it was.
Like the algae wasn't actively poisoning the fish. Right. The actual breaking point for Ang was that the murky green water entirely prevented the human from observing the tank.
Yes, which really points to a fundamental rule of system design, right?
Yeah.
A system's primary function dictates its value.
I love that. A system's primary function dictates its value.
Yeah, we have to ask ourselves what the actual purpose of an aquarium is in a human space. I mean, it is a habitat, certainly, for the animals, but its reason for existing in that specific room, in a house, it's observation. It is a visual medium.
So if you can't see it, it's failing. The loss of visibility isn't just like an aesthetic annoyance. It means the system has structurally failed.
The human element failed, exactly. If the core function of your system is observation and you can no longer observe, well, the system's utility has just dropped to zero.
That makes total sense.
It doesn't matter if the fish are biologically surviving in the green fog,
Yeah.
the tank is no longer functioning as a display.
It's just a box of green water taking up real estate in your living room.
Exactly. So Aang's decision to execute a total teardown wasn't panic. It was a really rational, calculated response to a terminal failure of the system's core purpose.
Man, draining that green water didn't just solve the visual problem either.
No, it revealed a lot more.
Yeah, dropping the water level and cleaning out the tank exposed these underlying architectural failures of the old setup. Which brings it to the deconstruction phase.
The teardown.
Right. Once Aang started ripping things out, this massive structural flaw was laid bare. I've been thinking of this as the terracotta mistake.
The terracotta mistake. I like that. The autopsy of a failed design is always illuminating, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what did Aang uncover during the deconstruction?
Well, Aang made this very deliberate decision to permanently remove these large terracotta pots that have been sitting in the tank.
Okay.
The journal notes that large terracotta pots are generally known in the hobby as, like, really great breeding grounds for cichlids.
True.
But, and this is a critical distinction, they were completely unsuitable for the specific residents of this tank, the dwarf cichlids.
Ah, right. We project these generalized solutions onto highly specialized users all the time. We think, oh, cichlids like terracotta pots, therefore I will provide a massive terracotta pot.
It's the trap of assuming bigger is always better, right?
Exactly.
I was trying to visualize the scale of this error for the fish, and it really reminds me of when you see an oversized giant sectional sofa crammed into a tiny studio apartment.
Oh, that is the worst.
Right, people think a big couch is luxurious.
Yeah.
But in a tiny space, it doesn't actually serve the residents' needs. It just completely ruins the flow and blocks all the sightlines of the room.
That analogy perfectly captures the mismatch here. Let's break down the actual mechanism of how dwarf cichlids breed because it's so interesting.
Please do.
They are what we call cavity spawners. So when they look for a breeding site, the female needs a tight, secure, highly defensible space to lay her eggs and protect her fry.
And fry is just the term for baby fish.
Right, exactly, the baby fish. So think about a massive terracotta pot. It has an enormous opening.
Yeah, it's huge compared to them.
Right. To a 2-inch dwarf cichlid, that isn't a secure cave at all. It's an exposed, totally indefensible airplane hangar.
Oh, wow, so it's actually scary for them.
Yes. Their biology dictates that they will abandon a site if they feel they cannot defend the perimeter. So the large pots actually triggered their vulnerability instincts rather than making them feel safe.
So the pots were just functionally useless to the inhabitants? They were an utter biological failure.
Completely.
But Aang also realized they were an observational failure too. The journal explicitly notes that these large pots were just too big for the space, and they actively blocked the view of the fish community.
Right, they created massive blind spots.
They did.
So it's a dual failure. They failed the biological needs of the fish because they couldn't breed in them, and they failed the visual needs of the human.
Yeah, no one is winning in that scenario.
Nobody. If you place a giant opaque clay wall right in the middle of your viewing window, you are actively sabotaging your own goal. It really highlights the vital importance of scale in any environmental design.
Scale is everything.
It is. An architectural feature that is out of scale doesn't just take up space, It becomes an active obstacle to the overall success of the system.
Which Aang recognizes, thankfully,
Mm-hmm.
makes the hard choice and just throws the giant pots out.
Good riddance.
So now the green water is gone, the useless infrastructure is removed, and the tank is stripped entirely down to the glass.
A blank canvas.
Yes. This is where the narrative shifts from destruction to creation. How do you engineer a new environment that solves every single problem the old setup had?
It's a huge challenge.
It is, But the answer Ang provides is honestly a masterclass in spatial organization. They utilize this highly specific concept of microzoning.
Yeah, it's like a transition from hobbyist to strategic urban planner. The new layout relies on a very deliberate zoning strategy for the foundation of the tank, the substrate.
And for anyone who doesn't know, substrate is just the material used to cover the bottom of the aquarium.
Exactly, the gravel or sand at the bottom.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's analyze the blueprint Ang actually laid out.
Let's do it.
The footprint of the tank is essentially divided into two distinct geographical zones, the back and the front.
Okay.
Starting with the back of the tank, Ang chooses coral rock as the substrate. And the journal points out this decision was specifically to, quote, keep things simple, end quote. They even mentioned plans to add an extra bag just to fill in any remaining gaps. So it's this purely structural, utilitarian choice for the back.
It acts as the back of house in a restaurant, like backstage at a theater.
Exactly.
It is foundational, it's low maintenance, and it's designed to just stay out of the way.
But the front of house is where the brilliance really shines. For the front area, right against the viewing glass, Ang completely abandons that chunky coral rock.
Totally different approach.
Yeah. Instead, they lay down a zone of finer sand. And the journal justifies this by noting that dwarf cichlids absolutely, quote, love, end quote, fine sand.
I just love how hyper-specific and tailored this is. How does a minor change, like fine sand versus rocks, completely change the utility of the tank?
No, it changes everything.
Yeah.
Let's explain the biological mechanism behind that preference, because it isn't just an aesthetic choice. It's not just about looks.
Okay, what is it about?
Dwarf cichlids belong to a group of fish that are essentially earth eaters.
Earth eaters. Yeah. Their natural ethology, their natural behavior, involves constantly taking mouthfuls of the riverbed, sifting out microscopic food particles, and then expelling the waste material through their gills.
Wait, so if they try to do that with chunky coral rock, they can actually damage their gills, right?
They could, yeah. Or, more likely, they simply can't exhibit their natural foraging behaviors at all.
Which is so sad for a captive animal.
It is, but fine sand allows them to sift safely.
Mm-hmm.
Furthermore, when they are preparing to breed, they actively excavate. They dig these little pits in the sand to move their cry around and keep them safe.
Oh, that makes sense.
You cannot dig a secure pit in heavy, jagged rock. So providing fine sand is really providing them with the tactile interface that their biology demands.
Wow. And Ang goes one step further in this sandy front zone, too. This is where they introduced the new terracotta pots.
Thinner placements.
Yes, but they are much smaller terracotta pots. They are specifically scaled down to serve as functional, defensible breeding caves for the dwarf cichlids. It completely reverses the giant sectional sofa mistake. They installed appropriate, scaled infrastructure.
What's fascinating here is that looking at these choices holistically reveals this incredibly elegant synthesis.
How so?
Well, Ang took the two conflicting needs of this system, the biological requirements of the fish and the visual requirements of the human observer, and managed to satisfy both of them simultaneously through geography.
Satisfying conflicting needs through geography. I really like how you phrase that. Walk me through how that dynamic actually plays out in the water.
Okay, think about the fish's motivation.
Right.
A breeding dwarf cichlid wants a defensible cave that actually fits its body size, and it wants fine sand to excavate. In the old setup, those elements were either missing entirely, or the fish might have tried to hide behind the massive pots in the back of the tank to find security.
Right. Which means they would completely vanish from Ang's sight. They would disappear into the blind spots.
Exactly. But in the new design, Ang has engineered an irresistible habitat and placed it strategically. The fine sand and the perfectly sized breeding caves are localized exclusively in the front zone.
Right in front of the glass.
Yes. So the fish's natural instincts drive them to seek out that specific terrain. Ang is actively aligning the fish's biological drive to inhabit that space with the human's desire for an unobstructed front row view of their behavior.
That is so clever. The fish naturally want to hang out exactly where the human wants to watch them.
Yep.
It really reminds me of designing a public park. Like if you want people to congregate in a specific area so the rest of the park remains quiet and peaceful, you don't put up a sign that says, please gather here.
Nobody reads signs anyway.
Exactly. Instead, you put the most comfortable benches, the best shade trees, and like the food carts in that specific area. You design the environment so that their natural preferences do the work for you.
It is environmental manipulation at its absolute finest.
It really is.
The back of the tank, the coral rock, remains simple, structured, and low maintenance. And the front of the tank becomes this bustling, perfectly scaled nursery and foraging ground pressed right against the glass.
So the sightline issue that plagued the old setup is completely resolved.
Because the points of interest have been geographically pinned to the front.
And the biological issues are entirely resolved too. The dwarf cichlids finally have an environment scaled to their actual existence, rather than the generalized existence of some hypothetical larger fish.
Right.
Every single element in that new design, right down to the specific grain size of the substrate, serves a distinct overlapping function that supports the overall health and purpose of the entire system.
It is such a profound shift from merely owning a tank to genuinely designing an ecosystem.
Totally.
And honestly, it serves as a really powerful reminder for anyone listening who might be struggling with, I don't know, a complex project or a failing team structure or just a stagnant system in their own life.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Sometimes you cannot just pour a chemical treatment into the water and hope the fog clears.
The Band-Aids don't work when the foundation itself is flawed.
Exactly. When a system is fundamentally broken, when the core function is obscured and your sightlines are blocked, the absolute best path forward is a total cleanup.
You have to start fresh.
You have to be willing to throw out the large terracotta pots that just aren't working, even if conventional wisdom tells you they should work, and commit to a purposeful, scaled-down redesign.
Tracing this journey from start to finish is just incredibly satisfying. I mean, we began in this murky, failing swamp of a tank, choked by an endless loop of green water and dominated by useless, oversized infrastructure that completely blocked the view.
It was a mess.
Such a mess. And we followed Aang's process through a total nuclear reset, stripping everything down to the bare glass. And we arrived at this beautifully streamlined, dual-zone sanctuary that perfectly serves the biological realities of the animals and the observational joy of the human who built it. So don't be afraid of the reset button, folks. It might be the only way to get your view back.
Well said.
But before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over.
Okay.
It's something that has been bouncing around in my head since I first read about Aang's painstaking substrate choices. It is the fascinating paradox of the aquarium itself.
The tension between natural behavior and engineered spaces.
Exactly that tension. Think about what Aang actually achieved here. The entire goal was to create an environment that perfectly caters to the natural instincts of a wild animal, right?
Right.
The sifting of the sand, the guarding of the fry in a tight cave, these are ancient wild behaviors. But to achieve that natural state in the glass box, to actually facilitate those authentic biological actions, it required an entirely artificial, highly deliberate feat of human engineering.
It requires immense calculated artificiality to simulate nature successfully.
Yes, it required zoning laws, architectural planning, and this deep, empathetic understanding of scale. It meant actively selecting the exact, specific grain of the sand and measuring the precise circumference of a clay pot.
Right, nothing was left to chance.
Exactly. To make the fish feel like they are in the wild, the human had to micromanage every single millimeter of their environment. So when you are the architect of a system, you can't just apply a quick fix and walk away.
You really can't.
You have to step back, look at the whole structure, and ask yourself, is this space actually working for the residents? Or did I just build a massive highway overpass in a tiny neighborhood and cover the whole thing in green fog?
That is an incredibly vital question to ask of any system we design.
Definitely. Well, until next time, keep your water clear and your sight lines open. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.